Welcome back, everybody. I am Abdi Lajavardi. I am part of American Heritage College, frontier in higher education. We are the home of knowledge brokers, professional knowledge brokers. And today we have one of our exciting boot camps that is focused on how to brand yourself, how you are looking to present yourself in the market as a professional. And one of the wonderful colleagues that we have, our own very vice president of education for our creative academy, a wonderful presenter. You are going to meet Miss Shahina and know why I say what I say about her, because she is an expert when it comes into marketing, digital marketing, and she's an artist. She's someone that knows how to communicate with colors, with words, with pictures. So now you get to hear from her to know how to create a brand for you that is long lasting and is impactful. So, with that, let's bring in Miss Shahina.
Thank you so much. Thank you for that kind introduction, Abdi. It's wonderful to be here with you all today and following along from that great presentation by my colleague Anne. I'm going to take you through some of the basics of branding, and in particular, we'll be looking at the brand key, which is a model that's quite widely used in the FMCG market, fast moving consumer goods. And what we're going to do is we're going to look at how the principles of the brand key and branding in general can be used for your own personal brand. So let's start by looking at branding. So you're probably asking yourself, what is branding? And put very simply, branding is your promise to your customer. It's your differentiator from your competitor, and it shows your clients and customers what to expect from your products and services. And fundamentally, in this particular case, it's your message. And we all know how important messaging is in branding because it influences buyer behavior. So that's a very brief overview of branding. But more importantly, it's understanding the value of branding. So your brand value is, is one of your most valuable assets on your, it's a valuable asset. And according to Nielsen, that when surveyed, 59% of consumers prefer to buy a product or a service from a brand they're familiar to. So you can understand how valuable your brand actually is. But branding is a process, I would say, and it's better to look at it as a sort of step-by-step thing. So when you think about branding, the word awareness comes to mind. So branding is generating awareness using for your business or yourself using strategies and a campaign. And one thing I came across, which I thought was brilliant, is that the goal of creating a unique and long-lasting image is really a positive image plus standout that equals brand success. Branding can be broken down into phases. So we've already mentioned the importance of brand strategy, but alongside that, there's also the importance of brand identity and brand marketing. So these are key things to think about when you think about branding your own business. Now, it's quite a lot of information to take in, and you're probably thinking, where do I start? So I've thought about probably a few things that are really important for you when it comes to branding and doing your own research. So, an effective and comprehensive brand strategy should include a few components, and that's brand discovery, it's competitor research, it's your target audience, your brand voice, your brand message, and your brand story. These are things that really should be top of mind when someone looks at your brand logo or even comes to any of your brand touch points. So you're probably thinking, again, that's quite a lot to take in. But what I would suggest you do is you bring all of that together. So you're probably wondering, hang on, she just did brand strategy, brand marketing, brand identity, discovery. How do I bring this all together? Well, luckily there is a tool for that, and it's a model, and it's called your brand key. Um, it's the way for you to discover that your purpose as a brand, because if you think about any brand, there's always a purpose behind it. And how do businesses do that? Well, essentially, they follow this model. And what it does is it brings together all different aspects of your brand. So you look at your brand value, you look at your brand benefits, your reasons to believe, your brand personality, and you bring it all together on one page. So we'll be doing this a little bit later in this presentation, but I've just mentioned something really important, which is your brand key. So some of you may be familiar to this term, but others of you, this may be the first time you're hearing the word brand key. So let me tell you what a brand key actually is. So a brand key is a guideline of sorts to help you define what your brand stands for. It's a framework behind your communications, and it's the flow from your brand. Often it's the starting point of building a brand, or it's where you go back to reshape your brand. So essentially, it's the key to your brand because it's what opens so many doors for your brand. So I'm going to run through a very quick exercise that really brings all these points alive. So we're going to look at a brand that's dear to me. It's called Hellmann's Mayonnaise. It's a global brand. It's got a large footprint. It's a market leader in lots of countries, and it's been around for a very long time. So from this image, you can see there's a sort of is a juxtaposition between the modern bottle and its packaging and a slightly more traditional dated image. And that's the kind of thing you could do when you really understand your brand. So let's look at Hellmann's brand key. So Unilever tends to do this. They sort of reinvent a model to be, as I would term, Unilever-fied, and they change a few things around, but essentially it is a brand key. So let's start by looking at the brand personality. So when I say to you Hellmann's, what do you think? Do the words easygoing, down to earth, and always great company come to mind? Or do you think of the opposite, as in, you know, stiff, rigid, and serious? So just bear that in mind. And then we'll be seeing this all come alive in a moment, but I'm going to go through all of these various points of the brand key. And while I'm doing this, if you actually think about your own brand and try and think about some words that will come to mind when we talk about your brand personality. So then we've got this called the brand discriminator, and really this is how Hellmann's differentiates itself from any other mayonnaise. Um, so the Hellmann's fits into two categories. Yes, it fits into mayonnaise and sauces and condiments, but it also fits into the dressing category. So what Unilever does is they look quite broadly at their brand and then compare not only to their direct competitors, but anything that would also be seen as a substitute or a broader competitor. And that's how we've got to only Hellmann's has this unmistakable taste and texture. And that's probably true because, you know, there's a certain taste to Hellmann's that you might not find in your supermarket own brand. And then we go to benefits. And normally when you think of benefits, you might just think of this in quite a narrow way. But what we do is we break down benefits in looking at the larger picture. And benefits, they can be functional, such as made with real, simple, high quality ingredients. which elevates everything it touches. So that's quite nice. So it's saying that Hellman's is something that you would add to a product to make it taste different. So it's not just a standalone. And then we look at the emotional benefits, which I really love, which is taking people from hungry to happy. And you could do a lot with that kind of emotional benefits. So later on, we'll be looking at this in more detail, but there's also another strand to benefits, and it's the psychological. And then we look at the brand point of view, and this is to lift your food, your mood, and bring a touch of richness to your day. Now, the thing is those words, they don't strike straight away mayonnaise, but that's the beauty of your brand key. You're meant to think broadly because um, that gives you much more scope when it comes to your brand comms. So, bringing richness, ultimate flavor, these are things that people aspire to, especially when they're cooking. So that's why Unilever does that. It takes a brand that you might not associate with richness, but it will make you believe that when you see the comms. Then then again, we look at the bottom half of this brand key. And what I like to do is I like to break the brand key up. So one is outwardly focused and one is inwardly focused. So I'm not going to go through all of this because I'm sure you could have a look at this in more detail. All I'm going to say is that instead of using the word target, which we saw in the earlier brand key, that Unilever uses a term that's called the people we serve. And again, it just reframes, targeting in a different way. And then it breaks down, these are very unique to Unilever brands, the product truth. And again, it uses the word elevate and the human truth. And that's moments of joy, separate living from just surviving. So what we're trying to do here is a moment of joy. So that's trying to say when you're enjoying yourself, you should have Hellman's on the table. Now, the bit that I find most interesting about this particular brand key is the roots, because Hellman's is a heritage brand. It's been around for 100 years. So it's got that. It's been a part of, different generations of family. And it's always been about being this real taste. And it's always been about quality ingredients. In fact, the creation of Hellman's was in New York in a small deli. So I think his name's Mr. Hellman. His whole Richard Hellman, in fact, his whole premise was around making sure that the deli and the produce from that deli felt like high quality. And this is where you get the introduction of the blue ribbon. And this is still symbolic. 100 years on, the blue ribbon is still symbolic to Hellman's the brand. So so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to bring all of this brand key to life by showing you one of the Hellman's ads, and then we're going to see if the words I've just used to describe come to mind. Okay, bear with me. Can you see this? Yeah?
I can see it, Shahina.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
perfect. Great. Okay, here we go. So there is one of the Hellman's ads that you just saw. And again, you could see what Hellman's are trying to do there. They're trying to elevate something that would be seen as, just a day of, normal day in the kitchen, but they made those potato wedges, quite a basic meal, really, look really delicious. And that's going back to the key points that they've made in the brand key about elevation, joy, happiness, from from striving to thriving. And this is a thing that a lot of brands do. So again, we're going to go back and have a look at the key. And this is a much more standardized key. And what I've done is, again, I've broken this key down because to me, this is what your consumers interact with. This is what your consumers are thinking when they look at your brands. And good brands do this amazingly. So here you have a bunch of logos, not fully formed, mind you. And even without the finites, I bet you can recognize some of these brands. And that's because these brands use the brand key. So I'm going to give you a little moment to have a little look at this and come up with a number of how many you recognize. I did quite well by the way. I think I got all but 4.
Oh my, there's a lot of them.
There is a few.
MasterCard. I see MasterCard.
I
Yep.
see Target.
Mm-hmm.
Is that Dunkin' Donuts? I shouldn't know that, but I do.
That's one I also knew, Mindy. So you get my point. It's like these logos are incomplete. You got IKEA as well up there, T-Mobile,
UPS.
Google, UPS, is it DHL?
Mm-hmm.
So this is what I'm just showing giving you this example that there you have an incomplete logo with no text, and we can still recognize
Right.
these brands. And the reason being is because these brands have gone off and given us reasons to believe in them. They've got a strong brand personality, and virtually they own these colors. Because as Mindy said, we've got the MasterCard logo there, and we know it. The Audi symbol, just those interlinking circles, even without the word Audi, we know it. That particular color of orange and magenta, Dunkin' Donuts. So there's the reason is those compared to these brands basically take the key elements and own the brand personality. But how do they do that? Well, this is coming back to the brand key again. They have great insight. They know how people will be able to feel about their ads. They know their competitive environment and how to differentiate themselves from their competitors. And again, going back to the Hellmann's example, they stick to their roots. So this is about also discovering your brand. And as I mentioned before, every brand has a purpose. No brand exists without a purpose. And every successful brand knows how to elevate that purpose. So for the example of mayonnaise, it's not a side, it's just not sitting there on the table. No, you can't have a burger without mayo, is where Hellmann's wants you to be. So it's giving you reasons to believe. Then every successful brand has brand values, beliefs, and personality. So again, we're going to do a similar thing. Here again are a bunch of incomplete logos. From my colleagues over there, you'll be able to help me out with a couple which is slightly more American, but I'm sure that's Taco Bell, and I don't even get to have that often. What I'm going to ask you to do is just take one and perhaps think about values, beliefs, and personality. And then I'm going to ask one of you to share that with us and see if we can guess who you're thinking of. So I'll give you a quick moment there. Everyone got one?
Yeah.
Okay. Mindy, would you like to share yours with us, please?
Yeah, this one is about bringing people together, being
Mhm.
reliable, being on time, being friendly, they kind of pretend that they're a family here to help other families come together.
Okay. Anyone want to guess who Mindy's talking about?
Well, I do see what Mindy says, and I think I see that unique, uniqueness too. I do see that. I don't know.
Did you want to guess which brand?
Is it the identity that you would?
So, so Mindy said it's bringing people together, being kind, bringing families together, and they're also seen as a bit of a family, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I do see that. Definitely, I do see that. That definitely I see. But I see at the same time elevation of their brand as well, so that stands.
Okay.
I'm having trouble figuring out which company she's talking about here.
It's who they say they are. That's
Yeah.
And I'm in tune with it right now because my daughter and my grandkids are coming to visit today.
McDonald's.
No.
American Airlines?
Yes.
Yay!
Yay!
Well done.
That's it.
I get a cookie. Woo!
McDonald's cookie for you, Terry.
Yes, thank you.
I have to say, I did think McDonald's initially until you said is seen as a family. So I was with you, Dennis. That was the one that came to mind first. Well, done, Terry.
I was thinking, I heard her say family connection. When I heard the word connection, and I'm looking through all of these, I was like, okay, how do we connect, right? Because anything related to food, but then I was like, well, that's not building a family connection. So yeah, that was the word that kind of helped me a little bit.
Mm-hmm. And anyone else want to give it a go? So
I have one that comes up here. Mm-hmm. And when I see the brand image, I am thinking of nostalgia. Someone who has, or a group that was an innovator in their particular sector, and what they were able to accomplish was giving people a chance to have fun in the home.
Okay.
So I know I'm not supposed to try to trick you guys, but there's a, but I am. It's fun.
Okay, so if I've heard correctly, they are innovators in their field. They bring fun to the home. Mm-hmm. And what was the last point?
Nostalgia. They bring a sense of nostalgia at this point. Did they bring a sense of nostalgia to everyone, or is that just something particular to you? I would think they're going to bring even more particularly someone of, we'll say, my age group. Okay, I think I've got it. Does anyone else have it?
I was going to guess, I think, is that Steven Spielberg or something on the bottom, second from the right?
Yeah, the moon.
Yeah, oh, that's a movie production company. I'm trying to remember which company it is, but that is not who I was thinking.
DreamWorks. Is that DreamWorks?
That's DreamWorks, yes.
Okay, can I guess? Does anyone else want to go?
Go for it.
Is it the Atari?
It is Atari. Yay. Nice.
I was gonna guess Pepsi.
Actually, Pepsi, yeah, it could be. It is a
You know
bit
what? No,
nostalgia.
she's very, yeah, I could see that, right? The nostalgia and but I guess the key word I was trying to give was that able to bring it to the home, because remember Atari was one of those gaming consoles that allowed people to be able to leave the arcade and bring that fun into their house with the 2600. So yeah, that's what I think of when I see that logo.
It's true. And it is that particular era as well, isn't it?
Mhm.
Yes.
Nice. Does anyone else want to have a go, or shall I move on to the next slide? Oh, quiet. So I will move on. So now we're going to be looking at benefits, and we've kind of covered bits of this off already in the earlier exercise. But you may remember me saying about benefits being subdivided. So and also remember, benefits are actually quite unique to the individual. So the way one person might see as a benefit, it doesn't mean that will be unilateral across all of your target audience. So the way to look at benefits is to see benefits as both functional, emotional, and psychological. So I'll go back to the example of Hellman's mayonnaise. The functional benefit would be something like its consistency, it being smooth, and also, for example, the squeezy bottle, that's quite functional, makes it easy to apply. So that's a functional benefit. The emotional benefit is something like Terry said earlier, because the brand has so much heritage, it's something that sort of goes through generations as such. So there's almost like an emotional attachment. And, you know, if you are a real mayo fan, you know, some people will go as far as not eating chips, fries without the mayo. Other people reinvent the mayo. And these are emotional things. So that sense that we feel connected to a brand, that's also an emotional component. And then psychologically, so, you know, psychologically, if there's something, you know, for example, it gives you a sense of joy, as they said in their brand key. So I'm just going to break this down for you a little bit more. And as you can see, these are all various benefits. So a functional benefit is that it saves you time and money. A emotional benefit could be that it helps you it helps your mental health, for example, or, you know, you might be feeling overwhelmed by something and it makes you work better, or it makes you feel smarter. So or a more sort of psychological one is that it helps you stay connected. So these are just really going into a deep dive of benefits. And again, this comes back to your own brand. What are the benefits of your brand? And when you think about it, how do you break that down? So that's benefits. And then, as you saw earlier in the brand key, there's reasons to believe. So the features that support your benefits, describing why your customer would choose your brand. So again, I'm going to give you a quick exercise, and this will demonstrate product versus brand. So here you have a product, and they at the minute they are unbranded. So if some people could just shout out how they would describe this product on the left, and then the others say if that's relevant for the product on the right. So Abdi, can you give us a few words about this product on the left, please?
Well, this is seemed like an Apple phone. And those colors are, you know, attractive. I mean, if I was a marketing person that I'm not, I think that's how relevant and sharp those pictures are
Mm-hmm.
to the right. And that's probably what I'm trying to sell.
Mm-hmm.
This is really a good thing for you to have.
Mm-hmm. And Mindy, would you agree that that still applies to the product on the right?
In some ways, the product on the right seems more rigid and firm and established in many ways, more linear. Maybe more of a traditional, like if I was going to think of professions, I'd think a STEM,
Mm-hmm.
that are more linear and empirical. And that's the one on the right. The one on the left is more creative and flowing
Mm-hmm.
and has a more fluid energy to it. So I would think more of the arts or cooking
Mm-hmm.
or something. And that's just based on the shape and the color and the position.
So perfect. So that's brilliant. Thank you, Abdi, and thank you, Mindy. I mean, it's great because you've also added purposes to both of the products. Sorry, were you about to say something, Terry?
I was going to say the one thing and again, we kind of know that the left is the Apple, it's an iPad, and we've got a tablet that's on the right. I feel like, again, because that's more of an Android product, they're trying to sell the flexibility of the product, right? The having that pin has always been kind of one of those things that up until maybe a couple years ago, the iPad didn't have, you know, and what they're trying to show is that you've got that flexibility and hey, this is something else you can do compared to this Apple tablet that's just right there. You know, yeah, you've got your button function, but now you can use a pin. Maybe I'm looking a little too far into it, but that's what I can see from it, right?
For sure. So it's nice because also Mindy's always said, giving us an example. So, she's mentioned education with the one on the right and more
Right.
recreation and creativity on the left. But you guys have all stolen my thunder for my next slide. But anyhow, I'm still gonna go with it. So what I'm trying to show here is that when you see the brand logo, you all kind of identified it anyway. Does that, I mean, essentially this is the same product. They're both tablets. And apart from the software, they're essentially doing the same thing. So it shows how much of our decision making is based on the brand. So there will be people who won't even consider the Android phone. And then there'll be people likewise the other way that won't be considering the Apple product. But we tend to overlook that essentially it's the same thing. Dennis, are you still with us?
I am.
Ah, yeah, perfect. So Dennis, are there any words now that you know the brand that you would attribute to Apple that you wouldn't attribute to Samsung?
Innovative.
Mm-hmm.
Trend setting. Maybe just a different way of saying innovative.
Mm-hmm.
I think the imagery is really, and might be more my opinion. I think it is appealing to a generation. I don't necessarily see them trying to be everything to everybody, for lack of a better term.
Mm-hmm.
So when I see it, I can identify that they're looking for a target audience. They're not looking to be available as another brand or product would be, for instance, Hellman's. They're really more targeted. They're really much more to what I think part of their brand is being forward thinking.
Mm-hmm. That's true. So it's interesting you mentioned the target audience. So the for Hellman's I know quite well. It's the normally ladies age 45 plus, but in fact, that might just be who is loyal to the brand.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a good point that you make that actually looking at these two products, is there a generational divide? And is it that, one is perceived to be more innovative? However, is the reality of that really the case? Because both of these companies have to probably spend fairly similar amounts on their R&D, and they have to be seen at being at the forefront of the market. So again, how much does this come back to perception? So then has anyone got anything else to say about this, or shall I move on to the next slide?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So I use that example because it also illustrates this part of the key, which is the discriminator. So what a discriminator is it's one of the most important things because it's what makes your product different from your competitors, and what is the actual difference between your brand and your competitors. So for example, we just did that exercise, and um, Dennis mentioned that the difference between the Apple brand and the Samsung brand is that in his perception, Apple were more innovative. Um, and that's where you could say something like only Apple is the main innovator in the market, and that's where you start building something called brand strength. And the more you can differentiate from your competitors, the more brand strength you have. However, in the industry, we tend to do something once we've actually established the brand, which is when we come to competitor analysis, we're almost monopolized by the idea of market share. So everything becomes about market share. However, there are softer ways of differentiating your product. So for example, achievements, and that was something that we touched upon in the iPad and the tablet comparison. If Apple are achieving things and they get that out into the public domain, in terms of like technology and innovation and R&D, those achievements actually influence buyer behavior. And then again, another soft measure is culture. And we're like in this time where culture and organizational culture has become something that's a part of this brand. Now, maybe we don't consciously think about a company or a brand culture when we're purchasing, but when it comes on the news, we're made aware. So again, it's taking a slightly more broader way of measuring your competitors. So I've done this for our brands, and here at the college, we would say our main discriminators when we look at the market that we serve is around this our offering of our brokerage service, our professional knowledge brokers. We're empowering people to come along and educate one another. So it's like a peer-to-peer network, which is slightly different to the traditional model. We're also very much focused on mindset, and we think that's equally important to when educating people. So we've kind of gone, and if you look at the educational market, it used to be very much about academic education, but we've seen that things have changed. So our model has adapted to that. And then, for example, my colleague Mindy has said things like, when we were formulating our plans, education for a better world. So that's our commitment to the greater good, because we know that, there's a really brilliant ancient Indian proverb, and it really brings this point alive. It says, we do not inherit the earth from our ancestors, we borrow it from our children. So we're really focused on empowering the next generation. We again think innovation and partnership is really important, and more than anything, we want to be solutions focused. So that's how the American Heritage College differentiates from our competitors. And there's a belief that our brand is our ethos. So again, this comes back to culture. If we're very clear about what our brand stands for, that becomes something that we integrate in everything we do. And then this is really the most important part of your brand key. So again, we're thinking about this from our perspective, but what we want you to do is actually think about this from your own. So that doesn't matter if you're an individual like myself, you're an artist, you still have a brand, or if you're a social influencer, you still have a brand. And the way you convey that brand is exactly the same as how you would convey a brand that's owned by a business. So if you remember earlier in the presentation, we saw the brand key. Right at the middle of the brand key, there's the most, what I would argue is the most important component, and that's the brand essence. So the brand essence is the core characteristics which define a brand. It's it's intangible attributes that separate your brand from its competitors. It's what your audience interacts with, and it's emotional and based on feelings. And again, you know, back in the day, we wouldn't really be thinking feelings when we think brand, but really now it is all about how you feel about that product. And your brand essence is unique to your brand. So really your essence should be all about something that consumers think of when they think of your brand. And it's not something they think of when they think about your category that your brand operates in. So, like I'll just give an example of one of the college's essence. It's about diversity and heritage. And that essence is actually really good because it makes us different from other colleges and educational places. I'm going to flip through this because I'm coming towards the end. But one thing to really think about when you think about your brand essence is that it interlinks with lots of things. So we went back to brand, we started with brand identity, strategy, market, and image. Your essence encapsulates that. So if you look at how we've broken this down, you'll see value proposition, you'll see your brand personality, your brand positioning, your attributes, your brand benefits. They're all separate components within your brand key. So once you've mapped that out, building your brand essence should actually be fairly straightforward because it's an overlap of other areas of your key. So I'm not going to go into too much detail, but you can have a look at that and find it's called the brand essence model, and you will find that same chart. Now, I come from a consumer research background, so this bit to me is really important. I'm also got a forever curious head, so the whys um, are really important when it comes to branding. What we said earlier is I broke the brand key into outward facing and inward facing. Now, any organization that wants to stay ahead, any organization that wants to innovate and do things differently, it needs insights. And whether they be soft insights like poll research, where people saying how they feel about your brand, or whether they are where what your markets or how you operate in markets, you need a constant stream because trends are always changing.
Mhm.
So consumer insights is imperative for any organization, and it's about, you know, it's more than trends, it's all about human behavior. It increases the effectiveness of your product, of your services, because you are in constant dialogue with your consumers. You actually are able to either anticipate a change that your product needs or be in line with it. So I'm a real advocate for consumer insights. Then we looked at target. So earlier we saw that Unilever has rephrased this, and I think it's really important that, you know, a target almost implies to me that, you know, you got a bow and arrow and you're just whereas people we serve just sounds so much nicer because it's a different kind of relationship. So again, this is something that you need to think about when you formulate your own brand key. And what we've done here is I've just given you examples of campaigns that we've run here at the college. And we've run them as 3 separate campaigns. And this is really important for targeting, because if you are serious about your targeting, you'll realize that these groups, they actually need different messaging. So when you're targeting and you're doing a targeting campaign, think about those messaging. I'm not going to go into this too much because I'll be here forever and a day. But another key point about your brand is remember that your brand is a touch point. So in every part of the purchase cycle, it's your brand that comes forward. It's your brand that your consumers are interacting with. It's your brand that consumers are having a dialogue with. And whether that's pre-purchase, so pre-purchase, they'll go on your website. Pre-purchase, they'll look at your advertising. During the purchase experience, it's like, how was the journey to buy your product? If your journey to buy that product is cumbersome, that's going to affect the decision making for your consumer. And then most companies think that's the end, but no, there's post-purchase experience as well. How you're billing, do you get any loyalty points? What was your customer service like? And these are really important things when it comes to your brand, because as much as brand has value, it can be devalued as well if any of these things don't fit properly, or if they change the perception in your consumer's mind, like you put out a shocking ad, boom, that's going to have a real but big impact on your bottom line. So again, this isn't really about campaign management, but seeing as the brand key touches on it, I'm just going to give some hints and tips. And I suggest whenever you run a campaign, make sure you have some measurements in place. So some of the things we use here at the college is, for example, we look at the visits to the website, so we know how much people are interacting with our website, and that's an important form of engagement. So that's a conversion. And then conversion, so I put broadly conversion, but more than likely you can get conversion measurements in anything. If you're running an ad, what's your response rate like? And from that response rate, how many of them turn into actual sales or interest? And then we have this other thing that mega brands use, but they're probably not feeding down to the smaller outfits, but it's a really useful thing to know. And it's called your net promoter score, and it's a global measurement. So what the net promoter score is really, you ask a series of questions in a Likert 1 to 5, and it's finding out how likely your prospect is to recommend your product or service. And then we're coming towards the end, and it's the roots. So for me, roots of your brand are fundamental in your communications, because strong brands are clearly defined by authentic brand DNA. They have they've stuck to their roots. So as you could see in the earlier example, Hellman's was originated in New York over 100 years ago, and it was all about that blue ribbon, which was about quality. So what Unilever did is made sure that that brand heritage, that legacy still exists. And and it actually has on the bottle, on the jar, it says, originating from whenever it was, on there, so people could buy in. There's more trust of a brand that's been around for a long time, and try and do it in a holistic way, because a brand should be an experience, and holistic brands have greater loyalty. And now we see that brands are actually just broadening. It's not just about giving a free product, for example. It's now like, what impact is this brand making in society? What impact is this brand making in community? And as you could see from the earlier brand key from Unilever, they actually measure that. There's something called the Sustainable Living Program, and that's the impact that brand is making in its community. So I think that's quite important. And then I just come back to our roots. So at American Heritage College, one of our roots is that, we've been around for a while, and we are connected to the community. Our roots from formulation has always been about intent and expertise and sharing our values. And that's continued throughout every stage of our development journey. So I just want to say, that's it, Dan. I just want to say thank you so much for staying with me. I hope you found this useful, and I'm just about to open up to any questions.
Well, I wanted to first of all thank you so much,
Mhm.
Ms. Shahina. Before any questions, I every time I look at a presentation in regards to branding and because it's so important, so many companies, as you mentioned and showed everybody, use branding as the way to communicate with the public who they are, to increase their reach. And obviously if you cannot make sales, you will not be around. So there are all kinds of reasons for that branding. And I really appreciate the way you looked at the 360-degree approach, because it's not only what you promise, but what you deliver and the experience in the process. So one of the aspects that, and I'm going to ask my question. One of the aspects that really interests me is some companies not only have clients or customers, but they have fans, right? I mean, a good example is like you see some individual pick up a brand, let's say Apple, right? There are some individuals that all over the world, they, approach this brand in the way that is more than a relationship with a product, as if they work for the company. How do you make your brand to work like that?
So your question is like, how do you get consumers into advocating your brand in such a way that they feel like fans?
Yes, well positioned.
Um, so there's a number of things you could do. First of all, most of the companies that have a large following in terms of and loyalty is through the relationship they have built with their consumers. So a lot of it comes down to building a very strong individual relationship. And this goes beyond traditional branding and marketing, is really understanding how to communicate with your audience and your target in a very sort of personal way. So I'll give you an example. In car insurance, that used to be a very sort of dry purchase. And it's very difficult to get excited about buying car insurance. I'm sure you would all agree. So what that company did is they used their roots. So they're old company for over 100 years. It's called Churchill Insurance. They had this friendly little yappy dog, okay? And they brought some fun into purchasing that car insurance. And what they did is they gave people that yappy dog when they bought it. So then what you would see is people would have this dog that just does this nodding behavior when they're driving. And there you've got someone who is just a consumer who would probably be dreading the idea that they have to buy a car insurance again, all of that paper. They're all excited about it because they got the yappy dog. So, that's one way of doing it. Do you take your brand, because this brand is called Churchill, very quintessentially British, they've brought that in, and that dog is their mascot, and that now something that's really dull becomes fun because you're rewarding your customer. So again, that's down to your original question. Know what your customers needs are, know how to communicate to them and reward them, because we're shifting now. It's no longer that we've only got one or two products and we have to buy it. No, you go to the supermarket, you can buy Hellman's, you could buy Heinz, you can buy a supermarket's own. So why is your consumer going to buy your product? And if they do, and they have been for a long time, you've got to give them, some credit for loyalty. So that's an example.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, well, Dennis, do you have any questions for Ms. Shahina?
No, the concept of branding is always fascinating me also. And what she shared, I think, in terms of the branding key is a tool I've never heard. So I think that in and of itself is an insight that I will embrace for the rest of my life.
Thank you.
Brilliant. That's
Mindy,
lovely. Thank
anything
you,
from
Dennis.
I it's funny when you were talking about insurance, I thought of Geico and Progressive.
Yeah.
Those are some of the funniest commercials. Do you remember the
Yes.
caveman? And then you've got the team of people that dress in white that get themselves into odd situations. I mean, they're very funny. The lizard, anyway. But really what Shahina, I was thinking about as you were going through that, I was thinking of, application to say a business, a collective of people who come in and create an established business together. But I also was thinking about the entrepreneur and how the steps in the process that you described could be applied for a personal brand, helping somebody step into their own strengths and their own future and understanding what it is they want. And so I thought that was really, really helpful because I think those two things can feed each other.
Mhm.
Mm,
Absolutely.
for
It's a
sure.
very good point. Yes.
Yeah, I think that's what was trying to get to, that it doesn't actually matter if you're a huge multinational or if you're a small bakery shop just on the high street, or if you are your own entrepreneur or a solo practitioner. Whether we accept or whether we acknowledge it consciously, we're a brand.
Mhm.
So, in my artwork, although I wouldn't really, from a traditional sense, see myself as a brand, but when people say, okay, that's done by Shahina, there'll be a certain, whether I like it or not, certain images and certain thoughts that people have. So, very much to your point, if we can get people who are solo practitioners and entrepreneurs using these tools, like Dennis said, is helpful for them because as a brand you have a personality, you have a proposition, and that doesn't matter whether you're a massive brand or if you're just starting out. So I was trying to get those points across, Mindy.
Wonderful.
I have a thought too. As I think just about the growth mindset, I do agree that everybody is a brand. And I think, and we have talked about this, I think a lot of people are unconscious about it. I think there's a lack of awareness about it significantly. And to the extent of being a professional, truly a professional, you manage that all the time. I think I see a lot of mismanagement in my space as to how my clients tend to mismanage social media, which goes back to the earlier presentation. So marketing is a new skill set. And I don't think a lot of folk who are business folk or in the business community really embrace it and put effort and or resources toward managing it.
It's true. It's true. I completely agree with you, Dennis. We are brands, but we don't really, because branding has been owned by such large companies, and the sort of trademark or the benchmark for what a brand should, what a brand is a bit hard for your average solo person or practitioner to try and compare. You're not going to sort of think that, Shahina Jaffa versus Pepsi. It's just not. But the truth is what you said. We're all brands, and we, as you mentioned earlier, we try and get across as professional. But when someone's purchasing something from us, they're buying it on all of those things that we mentioned. Our brand personality, our values, the reason to believe. So I'm hoping that this presentation has shifted that thought that we are all brands.
Oh,
Thank you.
I indeed would believe that anybody that has tuned into the live broadcast would agree that it has for them. And I want to, again, as Abdi had stated, thank you so much for that presentation. We each got to learn something. I love the interactiveness because I got to have fun and try to confuse everybody. That makes it fun for me. I enjoy that. So if there's unless anybody has anything else they'd like to share, what I'd like to do is I would like for us to, we'll get our recording stopped here and we'll take a quick break and then we can come back possibly. But it looks like Abdi wants to say something. So let me let Abdi say. And Abdi, you are on mute, please.
Again, thank you again, Ms. Shahina. And I want to just encourage everybody, please stay tuned for programs and activities that we have coming through all our divisions, but in particular for our Creative Academy, where Ms. Shahina is our Vice President of Education. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks. Thank you, everyone.